So I was in high school around the 80s, and the 80s and 90s was when the drug scene in DC was really crazy and rampant. And my parents really wanted me to get out of the area, to be honest. But Howard, um, you know, was definitely on my wish list of schools that I wanted to attend. Um, I chose to go to FAM because I really wanted a historically Black college experience after having the Gonzaga experience. So I applaud you guys for all having the vision and the foresight to choose a historically Black college to kind of do your collegiate basketball experience and your education. It'll definitely serve you well throughout the rest of your life. Florida A&M was by far the best thing that ever happened to me. It was the best 4 years of my life in terms of my development and my growth. I had the fortune of being at FAMU at a time where I was able to do 4 internships. So before I graduated from FAM, I actually did 4 internships. I did one with a company called IBM, which is basically like the Apple of today. I did another one with a company called Bristol Myers in their beauty division. I did one with a company called Eli Lilly, which is a pharmaceutical company. And then I did one with a company called Anheuser-Busch, which was my entry into sports marketing. They were the first company that taught me or showed me that I could actually have a career in the world, in the field of sports marketing. And back then, Anheuser-Busch, they still own Budweiser, Michelob, a bunch of Bud Light, a bunch of brands like that. But back in the 80s and 90s, they were the lead sports sponsor of like auto racing, boxing, baseball, a lot of different sports. And then they also was the lead sponsor on a lot of concerts. So back then they had this huge concert festival called the Budweiser Superfest concert. This would predate Coachella. It would predate Jay-Z's Made in America. Actually, Jay-Z's Made in America is the second iteration of like the Budweiser Superfest. So what you guys are able to experience through like something like Made in America or Coachella, Budweiser Superfest was doing many years ago through their initial, connection into music and festivals. And so for that summer, I had a chance to travel around the country and experience different sporting events and different music events through the lens of Budweiser. So I graduated from FAMU. I graduated valedictorian, believe it or not. I just worked hard, buckled down, did the work that I needed to do. Also partied a lot. So I think a lot of my peers were surprised when I actually did graduate valedictorian. It was kind of a shock to a lot of people. But I was one of these guys that was always really proud about, wanting to put in the work. And early on, coming from Southeast, one of the things that a lot of people had told me was that I was bright and that I was smart. And so I kind of leaned into that as kind of a part of my brand DNA. Like I've always wanted to be seen as one of the smart people in the room. And so graduating from Florida A&M, I ended up taking a job with a company called Prudential. They had a training program which was called PACE, P-A-C-E, which stood for Prudential Accelerated Career Entry. And I did this job. It was based in New York. I did it for about 2 years. The reason why I did it, Prudential had a program that if you went into this entry level program, this training program, and you also got accepted to a graduate school, you had to get accepted to one of the top 10 graduate schools in the world, they would pay for you to go to grad school. But then you would have to come back after grad school and work for them for like maybe 3 or 4 years to kind of pay them back. So it was a great program. It was a great way for me to learn the world of finance, learn the world of real estate, potentially go to grad school for free. But then I got into New York City and kind of lost my mind in the sense of like, New York was a big city. There was a lot of things going on. I started, developing an interest into the fashion world. I started developing interest into the music world. And so I started to recognize and realize that my interests were much more creative oriented versus wanting to do the world of strictly finance and investment banking. And so I started to explore opportunities in fashion and music and some other things. I actually landed on an opportunity to do fashion buying at this large retailer called Saks Fifth Avenue. So I became a buyer at Saks Fifth Avenue. I left Prudential, took this job at Saks, became a buyer, did that for about 2 years. And then while I was at Saks, I was basically in the running for a new buying opportunity. I was interviewing for a role, and I was sitting across, from a white gentleman who was going through my resume and reading, my background. And he had saw that I had graduated from Florida A&M as valedictorian. And one of the questions that he asked me was, do I think I could have done the same thing had I gone to Harvard or Princeton or Stanford or some other Ivy League type school that he recognized? And so I said to him that I actually turned down, which was true, I actually turned down a bunch of those schools to attend Florida A&M. And, his comment back to me was that he felt like my parents should have been committed for allowing me to make a decision like that. And what that moment taught me at that time was that there was a population of people out there that didn't value our Black education in the same manner that we do. And so it made me understand that if I was gonna compete at certain levels for certain level jobs, and be able to show these people that I could compete on the same level of guys and women that have gone to Harvard and Princeton and some of these other places, that I might need to go back and get my grad school degree. So I decided immediately that I was going to apply to either Harvard or Northwestern. Northwestern at the time, they had the marketing program at their Kellogg School of Business. They were known as the #1 marketing school in the world. I only applied to those two schools. I got into both, but I decided to go to Northwestern because I knew I wanted to do marketing. And so I decided to go to Kellogg at Northwestern to get my MBA, so that now no one could ever question me again based on, some of my education, where I went to undergrad or education. I would say personally that my Florida A&M education, I learned more than I actually did at Kellogg, but the Kellogg education from a society standpoint kind of validated me to them. And so the Kellogg education basically opened up a lot of doors for me. And so I ended up going to Kellogg, and it was at Kellogg where I ended up doing an internship with Reebok. And that internship at Reebok was what really opened up my career into the world of sports and fashion and music. So I ended up doing an internship with Reebok my summer in between my first and second year at Kellogg. I graduated from Kellogg. I ended up taking a job, not at Reebok, but I ended up going back to a fashion company in the Midwest by the name of Dayton Hudson. At the time, Dayton Hudson owned like Target. And so Dayton Hudson would be the equivalent of like Bloomingdale's or Macy's. And I ended up becoming a buyer at Dayton Hudson for about a year and a half. And then Reebok came knocking on the door again with another opportunity. And this time the opportunity they presented was in the category of basketball. And so I took the basketball role at Reebok. I left Dayton Hudson and went to Reebok, decided to take this role in the basketball category. And I was there at Reebok for about a year. This would have been at a time, I'm definitely dating myself. Some of these players you guys may not know, some of them you may, but back then Reebok had guys like, well, you would know this guy. So we had Shaq, we had Sean Kemp, we had Muggsy Bogues, we had Nick Van Exel, we had Glenn Robinson, whose nickname was Big Dog, and we had Kenny Anderson. So we had guys that were like that were of that kind of status back then. So that was the group that I was initially working with. And then about a year, year and a half into the role, I convinced we should take a swing at trying to sign this new phenom that was coming out of Georgetown by the name of Allen Iverson. So Reebok at the time didn't think it was a good idea. They didn't think we would have a shot at a player like Allen Iverson because we had no real connection or relationship with him. And so I had to convince them that I had a relationship, which I did, because me being from DC, me and John's son at the time, who ended up one day becoming the coach of Georgetown, but during our high school years, he and I played high school ball together. And so because me and John the third were close, I had met his father, John Sr., John Thompson II, and had been able to develop a relationship with him. And then when Allen was actually in high school trying to get into Georgetown, my parents and I had actually tutored him a couple of times to help him pass the SAT so that he could get into Georgetown. And so, so we definitely had some like inside, connections. And I told Reebok, I just need their backing on, allowing me to get the meeting. And if I got the meeting and they would support me, I promised them that, we would have an opportunity to get him signed. And so once I convinced them, they allowed me to go through the motions of making it happen. We started creating some product. I created this product line called, initially it was called The Question, because his nickname was The Answer. And we wasn't even sure if we were going to be able to sign him. So we ended up calling the project, codenamed the project The Question, because there were all these questions about whether or not he was even coming out, whether he would sign with us, whether he was going to be the #1 pick, whether or not he was even good enough to play in the NBA, whether he was worth all the trouble, like all these questions that were kind of circulating around him. And so we codenamed the project The Question. And the rest, as you know, is history. We were successful in signing him. I was able to, basically be the general manager of that business. I grew that business from, nothing, from a startup to a $600 million business on behalf of Reebok. As a result of that business, AI was able to get a lifetime deal with Reebok. And then I was also the person, this was the first time anyone has ever done this, especially from a sneaker company or any kind of endorsement company on behalf of a player. I actually also convinced Reebok to allow us to set up trust on behalf of Allen. So when Allen first signed, we signed him for a lot of money. He was making a lot of money from us. He was making a lot of money from the Sixers. And I convinced him to allow me to take some of that money and put it in trust so that he wouldn't spend it in today's money, or he wouldn't spend it today. It would be set in a trust. We could spend it years from now. So thank God I did that, because when he turned, we set up 2 trusts, one that he would have access to when he turned 40, and another one when he turns 50. So there's even another trust out there that he hasn't had a chance to tap into yet. And because of those trusts, we were able to set it up. Like there's probably 25 to 30 million in each trust. And so long story short, a lot of people think he went broke, but he never went broke because he has these 2 trusts. And so, but a lot of that was just because of the relationship he and I developed, me wanting to do that. And like I said, most companies don't do that for the people that they endorse. So long story short, I do that. I turn this into a successful business. And about maybe 6 years after working with AI, or maybe it was more like 4 years after working with AI, I had convinced Reebok that we should take the success of the Allen brand and extend it into entertainment. And so Reebok was the first brand back then, because of my leadership, that started to do deals with entertainers. So we did a deal with Jay-Z, we did a deal with 50 Cent, we did a deal with Pharrell, we did a deal with Lil Wayne, we did a deal with Lupe Fiasco, we did a deal with a whole host of different players and some actors. And now that stuff is kind of commonplace. Every brand is doing it. But Reebok was the first brand to do it. And we kind of did it out of necessity, because we weren't able to sign a lot of the top athletes, because Nike was getting most of the top athletes. We were doing it because we were trying to find other ways that young people like yourselves were being inspired and influenced back then. And so we ended up signing some of these entertainers as a way to build our cultural connection to the younger audience. And we ended up setting up a sub brand called RBK. And so RBK was a brand that I ran for many years at Reebok, and ultimately turned that into a very successful brand within Reebok. And then from there, I ended up, Adidas decided at some point that they wanted to come in and buy the Reebok brand. I decided that, you know, Adidas offered me the chance to move to either Portland, Oregon, or to move to Germany, which is where they were globally headquartered. And I had no interest in moving to Oregon or to Germany. And so I decided to, you know, basically cash out whatever stock I had, and kind of I was going to leave and go do something different. And so ended up leaving Reebok. I ended up taking a job with a company called American Eagle. Many of you have probably heard of American Eagle Outfitters. I ended up basically coming over there running sports and entertainment for them for a couple of years. I did that for about 2 years. The reason why I had to go to American Eagle and I couldn't go to another sneaker brand was because I had this thing in my contract called a non-compete, which Reebok and Adidas ended up enforcing. And that non-compete wouldn't allow me to go and work for Nike, Puma, New Balance, you know, or another competitor for like a 18-month to 2-year moment. And so because of that non-compete, I had to go to work at some place like American Eagle. But almost 18 months to the day of my non-compete, when that non-compete was over, I ended up going to work at Nike. So Nike, for the whole 18 months that I was at American Eagle, kept courting me and trying to convince me to leave American Eagle to come work for them. I told them that I would be able to do it on a certain date, and they held strong to their word. And literally the minute that date hit, they made an offer that I couldn't refuse. And so I ended up going to work for Nike, based out in New York, as the head of marketing for what they call Nike East. And Nike East was basically everything from Maine, upstate Maine, all the way down to Miami. And at the time, that was probably a $7 billion territory for Nike. So, you know, I was basically, you know, running the marketing for a $7 billion and territory for Nike, which at the time was probably the largest territory for the Nike brand. And I did that for about 3.5 years. And then from there, Nike wanted me to move to Oregon, and I couldn't move to Oregon again because I have kids. I had young kids and that were athletes and doing different things, and I didn't want to move. So I didn't move to Oregon. So I went and started my own consulting company, doing advertising and consulting work for a bunch of different brands. I ended up helping D Wade to launch his new brand with a Chinese footwear company by the name of Li Ning. So we ended up being the head of marketing for the D Wade brand with Li Ning as a consultant. And then I also was helping Puffy to launch his new television network called Revolt. So I was kind of like at the launch of Revolt, was the interim like CMO and head of marketing for Revolt. And I was doing some other projects on some other tech stuff with some other, you know, and athletes and celebrities. And so I was having a nice little run with it. And then I got a call from one of my friends who had just become president of Def Jam Records. And he wanted me to come in and help him to, you know, recreate the record label of the future. Def Jam was one of the few record labels that had a real brand name. He brought me in as the head of brand. And at this time, Def Jam had like, this would be in like 2016, 2017. So Def Jam had Jay-Z, Def Jam had Nas, Def Jam had Young Jeezy, 2 Chainz, Rihanna, Kanye West, Justin Bieber. And then we had a couple of emerging artists like 070 Shake. We had BB Borelli. We had Alessia Cara. We had Big Sean. We had, who else? So you kind of get the gist. Like we had a nice mix of, a nice roster of different musicians, you know, pop stars to, you know, rap icons and so on and so forth. So went in and I was doing that for about a year. And then I got a call from a woman who was working at the National Basketball Players Association. She was running the National Basketball Players Association. They were starting a for-profit company where the premise of this company was that they were going to take the collective rights of players and create a licensing and sponsorship and content and experiential company to go and monetize those collective rights of the players. And she asked me to come in and be the head of brand for that opportunity. So I ended up leaving Def Jam to go do this opportunity. So I'm currently now the Cheif Brand and Innovation Officer for the NBPA, which stands for National Basketball Players Association. And it is our job at the NBPA to support, protect, and amplify the rights of all 450 active players. You basically got 30 teams in the league, 15 people to a roster max. So 30 times 15 gives you 450. And so, you know, I ended up rebranding the for-profit company inside the PA. We call it Think 450 because it's our job to come to work every day and think about all 450 players and how we can help them with their off-the-court ventures and opportunities, and how, you know, we can help them to understand that collectively there's more power with them as a collective. And then we, you know, we call it Think 450 because it's a reminder to the players that they have this power as a collective, and they should be thinking about 450 and doing things not just singularly, but also for the betterment of the brotherhood. And then it was also a reminder to brands that if they wanted to do anything in basketball or basketball culture, they should be thinking 450, because we're the only entity on the planet that can give you access to all 450 guys. Like, there's no other entity that can do that. We have the rights to be able to do that. So you may ask, like, well, how do companies leverage those rights collectively? There's companies like 2K who can't make a video game unless they have the rights to every single player to be able to put in that game, so that that game can be the most authentic that it's capable of being. So in order for 2K to make that game, they have to do a deal with us in order to get the rights, the licensing rights, to be able to include our players in the game. The PA owns the rights to the player's name, the player's likeness, the player's number, and the player's data. Any data that's generated from a player, from something like a Fitbit, or, you know, game information on their shooting percentages, or any of that kind of data that's personal to them, the players in the PA own that data. The league, the NBA, is set up to protect the teams and the team owners. And so the league only has the rights to grant to the team names and the team colors. Like, that's really the only thing that they have the rights to. So when you think about somebody like Nike, who's the league official jersey maker for the NBA, Nike has to do a deal with the NBA in order to put the team name across the front of the jersey. And then they have to do a deal with the NBPA in order to put the player name and the player number on that jersey. And then the way that happens is they sell jerseys, players make a royalty on how much jerseys they sell. The way the players have agreed with certain businesses like the video game business and the jersey business, they've agreed to do it as a collective. So that means, like, for any given year, let's say you sell 1 million jerseys, Steph Curry, I'm making this up, might sell half of those. He might sell 500,000 jerseys, and everybody else as a collective sells the other 500,000. But in total, we sold 1 million. Because of the way our deal is set up, Steph Curry is going to make the same amount on all those jerseys, even though he sold the most, as the 15th best player on you know, the New York Knicks. So you know, there have been certain categories that players have agreed to allow the brotherhood to kind of like benefit from as a collective, and then that money is used to help, you know, players for when they retire to have health care, a 401k, you know, and things of that nature. So the money is put together or put to use for future use for players, so that once they retire, they constantly have some type of income that might be coming in once their playing days are over. And then while they're playing, we also give them, you know, every year there's a royalty check or a licensing check or, you know, a check that the PA pays out every year to players. And it's a pretty significant six-figure check that every single player in the league receives. So I know that was a long-winded, you know, introduction, kind of taking you through the journey of my background and the different experiences that I've had. It basically took us 30 minutes to kind of walk through that. I apologize in advance, but I wanted to at least give you guys a full understanding of what my journey has been like, the kinds of things that I've done, because I think it's stuff that a lot of you will probably have some interest in wanting to do once the ball stops bouncing for you and you start to think about the next chapter of your career. So if we want to open it up for some questions, or do you want me to just keep talking about a certain topic? You know, we can do this however you want to do it.
I would say we could open up for some questions.
Awesome. Anybody?
Can you hear me? Hey, I got a question for you. If no one else got one.
I can hear you.
When you're in a position like Reebok, and you know you make what is your thought process when you are making decisions, like marketing wise, to change the game? Like you said, like you went from, I guess the mainstream was to, you know, endorse a lot of athletes and you really try to get the top athletes to make, you know, to, I guess, really get the brand out there. But you decided to go to a lot of celebrities, like, you know, you said 50 Cent, Pharrell, and that kind of changed the whole game. So what is your mentality like to come up with stuff like that, like kind of revolutionize like how everything?
That's a great question. Thank you so much for asking that. Seriously, because that question is everything to the strategy in terms of what you were doing. Reebok at the time was seen as like what a lot of people would call, we were a challenger brand because Nike was number one. And for many years, internally at Reebok, we were always trying to what I would call out Nike, meaning like if Nike did this, then we did that. If Nike did X, we did, you know, we tried to do X 2.0. If Nike did Y, we tried to do Nike Y 2.0.
Yeah,
and so we could never compete with Nike in that regard because they had more money than we had. And honestly, it was a positioning that they owned in the marketplace. So Nike was always known as a performance company that was using lifestyle to make it culturally relevant. Reebok, on the other hand, was a lifestyle company that was using performance to make it culturally relevant. So back then, brands like Adidas and Nike, because they were so performance focused, they couldn't even fathom the idea of working with people that were non-performance related, so non-athletes. They couldn't really fathom doing and structuring deals with them, right? And so through a lot of research, and then at the same time, our companies was doing a lot of research on consumers and how consumers were shifting and how the you know, what Reebok was once an all women's brand, primarily a white women's brand, and it was starting to transition in certain parts of the US into more of a younger urban aesthetic. And so we were doing a lot of research around what was driving that and what was influencing that urban aesthetic. And what we noticed was that a lot of young people were not just inspired by athletes, they were also inspired by entertainers. And what we also noticed is that athletes were actually inspired by entertainers, right? So we were taking all these insights and it was up to me to try to find a way to take these insights and present it to pretty much an all-white executive team at Reebok in a manner that they could understand. And so what I started explaining to them was that this would give us a unique position in the market that we could own, meaning that none of those other brands were going to try to compete with us in this way because it went against the grain of what those brands were really about at that moment in time. It went against their DNA as a brand. So for us to go and do these entertainment deals, no other brand would do it. But the caveat that I gave, the caveat that the thing that really made this work, and this was the most important insight, we couldn't just go and sign entertainers for the sake of signing entertainers. Otherwise, it would have never worked. In order for it to really work, we had to find people that were still authentic and connected to sport somehow. So we signed Jay-Z, and we built a lifestyle collection around Jay-Z and a performance collection. And this performance collection was around basketball. And you got to remember, this was when, you guys know Jay now, you know, and the billionaire Jay. This is way before the billionaire Jay. This is when Jay was just rapping about wanting to be a businessman, right? And so we were the first company to really do a deal with Jay-Z, where we gave him a structured in a way where it was a 50-50 partnership. And Jay-Z back then was the guy like LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony and all the young guns that were coming up as the next wave of the future of the game. These were the guys that he was influencing. They were coming to Jay for advice. They were coming to Jay to hang out. And so Jay had this connection to basketball that no other kind of entertainer really had. And this connection was authentic because guys really were, you know, messing with Jay. And so, so we ended up signing Jamal Crawford and Kenyon Martin as the first two athletes to wear the S. Carter collection on an NBA court. So that's what we did with Jay. Jay was really focused on basketball. With 50 hadn't even put out his first album yet. So I had a friend that worked at that worked at 50's management company. So he was the one that was telling me about 50 and what was about to happen. And so I basically made a bet on somebody that hadn't even been proven yet. And basically, you know, he let me hear the album early before the public heard it. And I just heard it and thought it was like, I just felt like it was going to be a winner. And so the Get Rich or Die Trying shit was just going to be crazy. And I wanted to be a part of it. So we ended up doing a deal with 50 because he was a Golden Gloves boxer growing up, and he was really big on training. And in our category at the time, or in our industry at the time, one of our biggest categories was training. So we used 50 as a lifestyle play, and we created stuff like boots and lifestyle product. And then we also did a performance product, which was around training. And then Pharrell was our connection to skate. So back then, a lot of brands was trying to figure out skate culture. And we did a similar thing with Pharrell. We created a lifestyle play, and we created a performance play around Pharrell that had to do all through the lens of skate. So that was really a lot of the thinking. Like we used the positioning of our brand to be able to kind of lead us there. And then I used the insights of keeping it really authentic to sport in terms of why we did a lot of the different deals that we did. The other insight that I had that made it so that all these entertainers wanted to do it was, and you guys may not remember this moment, but there was a rapper by the name of Nelly who had created this song called Air Force Ones. And Nelly and I we were really close. Like we would hang out a lot. And when he created this song called Air Force Ones, at the time, it was not only a #1 song, but it was also one of the top videos that was playing on MTV. So it was basically like a free commercial for Nike. And so I asked Nelly, you know, after seeing the success of the song, one time we was hanging out, I was like, damn, so Nike must have really broke you off and hit you, you know, with a lot of bread for doing that. And he was like, bruh, they didn't give me nothing. Like all I got from doing all of that was they just sent me some extra boxes of Air Force Ones. And it really blew my mind because literally that song made millions and millions and millions of dollars for the Nike brand. And so it just showed that Nike didn't really have, at that time, a real respect for the entertainer and the value that the entertainer could bring to their brand. And then I don't think a lot of people understood that the music videos that were being created were like, they were basically commercials that young people like you and people back then were watching to see what was relevant and what was cool and what was, you know, on trend. And so a lot of that, the way you guys are in Instagram, that's how people used to be on MTV watching the latest music videos. That's where they would get a lot of their cultural cues from in terms of what was hot and what wasn't. So.
I have another question. So you've been in so many different positions in like different companies. What would you say some of the things that were a connection between all the different companies that you've been in?
That's a great question too. I would say for me, because I grew up as a basketball kid, like most of you guys probably grew up, and I grew up thinking I was going to go pro, and I grew up thinking I was going, be a top level D1 player and all of that. I mean, the whole reason why I ended up going from Southeast to Gonzaga was to play ball. And so one of the things that has been a secret to my success in everything that I've done is that team sports teach you how to really, how do I say this? I think athletes who play team sports have the best success in the business world or in corporate environments because you're always having to collaborate. You're always having to understand your role versus someone else's role. And so the key to my success has always been that I've been a great collaborator. I've been someone that has understood the power of team, and I bring a lot of and then I also, I live in Philly now, so this whole trust the process and understanding the process of how things work has been very instrumental to my success. Like I take a lot of pride in the process, and I take a lot of pride in understanding that, you can't have victory without preparation, right? Like you need the process in order to really win. And so once I really understood that most corporations are about organizational process and making sure that things go through a certain process and coming to work every day as if I'm approaching it like I'm playing ball, it really helped me to be a lot more successful, and it's helped me to be really engaged in the work. So I do a lot of the way I lead, the way I manage, I do a lot of it as if I'm still playing ball. Like I use a lot of sports, talk. I use a lot of sports stories. I use a lot of inspiration from sport to inspire my teams and to use as kind of like case studies and inspirational moments for us when we're having tough times at work. So.
I appreciate it.
And I would say like one of the things I did learn, right? And this is kind of like ball, right? One of the things I learned early, like, think about it like this, man. Like, I'm in my 50s. I've had to evolve, like, because now think about the role that I'm in as the Chief of Brand and Innovation for 450 of the most influential young men, especially young athletes or athletes on the planet. And they range from like 19 to fucking 30 something, right? And so I got to know what's going on with TikTok. I got to know what's going on with real estate investment. I got to know what's going on in fashion. I got to know what's going on in music. I got to know what's going on in restaurants. I got to know what's going on in wine. I got to know what's going on in tech and Bitcoin, all the things that my players might be passionate and interested about. I have to be willing to evolve, to remain nimble, to remain agile. So I'm saying all that to say, the thing that I learned throughout my career is not so much the knowledge that you're gaining, like, because that knowledge is going to change. Like, things are going to change. Think about this, when I first started working with AI and we were doing Reebok, there was no social media. There was no such thing as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, none of that, right? So I've had to learn and adjust and be nimble and learn a whole new social media marketing strategies and digital marketing. Like, there was none of that stuff when I was paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to Kellogg to learn about marketing. Like, none of that stuff existed. So the key is you have to pride yourself on always wanting to learn, always wanting to to come to work or come to practice every day and be a sponge and learn something new, right? That's what I had to figure out early, because it's changing. The marketing world, the tech world, the startup world, the world we live in, working with influencers and entertainers and athletes, is constantly changing. So one of the things I've tried to narrow it down, I call it, I'm big on acronyms, and as you probably most coaches and people that play, like, we all have these acronyms that we use, but I'm big on acronyms. And so I've kind of narrowed it down to this acronym that I call FIT. Like when I'm hiring or when I'm looking for what I might need on my team, I'm looking for that fit, right? But FIT for me stands for, the F stands for what I call a figure it out trait. I want people who are natural born problem solvers, somebody that can come in and just figure it out. They don't need a lot of direction. They're very resourceful. They played with puzzles. They did Legos. They like to build. They like to tinker. They're good with their mind. They might be good with their hands, but they have this desire to like try to figure some things out. Like they're problem solvers, right? They can get from point A to point B. They can, do different things. So they have this like figure it out trait, right? The I stands for, and this is where, it stands for what it stands for intelligence. Like they have to have, so if you're coming in as a marketer, I want you to have functional intelligence around the function. Like you got to know marketing. You come in as a finance person, I want you to have functional intelligence around finance. If you're coming in as the player person, the player engagement guy, you need to have functional intelligence around understanding players, whatever it might be. So the I stands for intelligence. And then the T for me stands for trustworthy, right? Like, do I feel like they can be someone that I can trust? Because at the end of the day, whether you playing on a team, whatever kind of environment you work in, wherever you grew up, it really does come down to trust. Like you connect with people, you collaborate with people, you have the best success when the team is united and everybody feels like they have each other's back, right? So being someone that I feel like that's dependable, that's going to show up, that when I get myself in a tough situation, I'm not going to be left there alone, fending for myself. Like I can trust that they're going to stand there and hold me down or work through the problem with me or whatever the situation might be. But that's what at a high level, that's what I kind of look for. Those are the most important traits to me in terms of success, is that fit. The other key piece to success is what I would call this ain't really, it's really like public speaking, like an ability to connect with people, an ability to be able to connect with people and what do they call it? Like be engaging, you can connect with someone and feel like you're real and authentic. Like if you have that ability plus the fit, you can do whatever you want to do in life. And I mean that sincerely. Like I've seen people, like there was a guy who used to work for me at Nike. He didn't really have a college education. He played professionally in Puerto Rico. He was a kind of like a street ball legend within New York City. He was brought in when I was at Nike. He was my manager of basketball in New York. And he was really good at storytelling, and he was really good at connecting with people, making people feel comfortable, making people feel important, making people feel relatable. And he knew the culture. Like he was really, smart about knowing the culture. No education, none of this, right? So we do a lot of work in New York where LeBron would come into town, Kobe would come into town, Kyrie was coming into town. And so we had, anytime these guys were coming in town, because they come into New York, they're always, everybody, anytime someone's coming to New York, they were looking to be entertained. Like they want to be entertained, going out. They want to release product and do something really big in New York because it's New York. They want to play well in the Garden. So it's all these things that they're trying to do. And so I had this guy's name is Paul Rivera. And I used to have him, he was like the point person that would manage and go out with a lot of these guys and make sure that they were straight when they was moving around the city and doing all these different things. Long story short, he ends up becoming a very trusted member of LeBron's camp, right? And back then it was like LeBron, Maverick, Rich Paul, and Randy. Like they were like, and they called themselves the Four Horsemen. This guy Paul, who also goes by PR, but Paul ended up becoming such a trusted member of their circle, they made him the fifth horseman. Now he didn't grow up with them like the rest of it, like Randy, Rich, Maverick, and LeBron all grew up together. They all had history from Ohio. They had all these connections, family connections, friends connections, all this. PR was just a guy that they had met through the Nike, but because he had this figure it out trait, because he had intelligence around basketball, and because he came across as someone that they could trust, they let him in the inner circle. Now he's bona fide fifth horseman. He's, you know, running LeBron's advertising company, helping LeBron with all the brands. He's actually the one who created the show The Shop on HBO with him and Mav. Him and Mav actually have now their own podcast series. This dude has no college education, doesn't come from formal training, but he had a grit, a tenacity. He listened. He was always willing to learn, and he had that fit characteristic. Like he, you know, he had that, you know, you would go around the city with him. I'm not waiting in a line with LeBron. I'm gonna figure out how to get him in his club, or I'm gonna figure out LeBron's calling and he's like, yo, I'm trying to find this shoe. It's hard to find. I'm gonna figure it out for you, or whatever it might be. But he just had that knack for it, and was able to connect with those guys in that way. I know I was all over the place on that. I apologize.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Context, yeah.
I got a question.
Yep.
So I'm supposed to be graduating from Drexel University in June.
Okay.
And I'm coming to Howard to get my master's. And I think one of the reasons I chose Howard is because I wanted to get that cultural experience at a HBCU, and I wanted to know, like, what do you think is the most important thing that you got out of being at an HBCU, since you've been in both scenes as well?
Man, impressive question. First, salute you for having a foresight and not succumbing to the societal pressures to feel like, because I admit, like, if I had it all over to do again, I should have probably went to a black school to get my graduate degree too. One of the things that I'm gonna get to your question, but I think it's important. One of the reasons why I went to FAMU was the dean who was in charge of the business school at the time. She called me, and because, you know, me going to Gonzaga was trying to steer me towards more of the white institutions so it could help, you know, show future kids that wanted to come to Gonzaga that all these kids were going to all these, you know, predominantly or what they would consider to be prestigious white institutions, right? And so, but the dean called me and she hit me with a question where she was like, well, you know what makes Harvard great? You know what makes Princeton great? You know what makes all those other schools great that you're considering? And I was giving her all, like, I didn't know. Like, I was guessing, trying to throw answers out there. And she was like, nope, nope, nope. And she finally said, it's the alumni. It's the people who have gone to those schools, who have done great things, and then turned around to come back and support those schools. That's what make those schools great. And she was like, I see that in you. Like, you can be that kind of student. So, you know, I bought it hook, line, and sinker. Going to in a sport perspective, right? And it's like, you guys, by doing the work that you all are doing and laying that groundwork, like, that's what you're trying to bring back. But HU is definitely one of the few schools that is respected across the board. So, like, when you talk about Harvard and Stanford and you say, oh, and there's also two, you know, kids from Howard or kids from FAMU that are in the mix, don't nobody even blink an eye, right? Because HU and FAMU kids have been able to stand up, or alumni have been able to stand up to any of those other institutions or schools. Mm-hmm. I think the other benefit that you have at HU that's probably a little bit stronger than the FAMU is the influence of your alumni. You know, you got strong alumni that have gone there. I think the location of being in DC, in the heart of, you know, the country, where you know, everything is kind of moving and being created. I think it's super important. So you get access to a lot of people and a lot of information and a lot of things that a lot of other places just don't have. But I think going to a school like that is a lot of benefit. For me, I always felt like it was home. Like I felt comfortable. Like I felt like my teachers and my peers and the people that were around me had my best interests at heart. It wasn't, I didn't feel like they were trying to manipulate me one way or another. Like they were really, you know, invested in my success and the realness of my success. It didn't come with, you know, like I said, when I felt like at times at Gonzaga, I was being used to, you know, so that they could improve their future recruitment by saying, you know, they had this young black kid that went to Harvard or Princeton. I just feel like, you know, it's a lot more pure at some of these historically black colleges and institutions. And on top of that, I feel like what it also does, it gives you a lifelong accountability, meaning like you end up going to an institution like that, you see the power of what success can really look like because you sit in a classroom every day with other people that look and feel and smell and act like you, and some of them are smart and successful and innovative and bright, and you realize that there's real potential and possibility there. And so it holds you accountable to a lifetime to understanding like, nah, you don't have to, just because you went to Harvard don't mean you better. Just because you went to Stanford don't mean you better. Our schools and our institutions are just as important, if not even more important. Because I think we come out of there with more confidence. We come out of there with more of a commitment to want to prove to the world. You know, you come out with this chip on your shoulder because you want to show that what you really are capable of. And so I think all those are great qualities to have. Like, and it'll take you far in life. Like, you know, so I hope that answered it, but you know.
Yeah, because I went to McNamara for high school. So like I saw that environment, and then going to Drexel was like a complete different change. And I definitely saw the difference in like feeling at home and the comfort that I had at the two places. And then now coming back to Howard now, I feel like I would get that comfort back.
Yep.
Yeah.
And for us, that's half of it, right? Like being able to feel confident when you walk out there that you can compete with anybody, being able to feel confident and not have your ideas be laughed at or diminished. I mean, think about what Coach Blakeney is trying to do, like the kind of people that he's going to try to introduce you guys to. Like most coaches don't give a fuck like this. Like they're not doing this, you know, or if they are doing it, they're doing it because they go to like a Duke or they're at a school with a lot of boosters, and, you know, and these boosters are just, you know, they're the ones that are kind of pushing for it. Like the coaches aren't naturally trying to make sure that their kids are set up for success and set up for understanding what the real world is going to be like, because it's definitely competitive. And then I also find like successful HBCU students, like we tend to look out for each other, you know, like we tend to want to support one another, especially in the corporate, or at least I feel like from my context, I do. Like if it comes down to a FAMU HU student versus Princeton and somebody else, like I'm always going HBCU. So
right. Yeah. Appreciate it.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
yes.
Oh, sorry. Basically, my school was always stressed. Like my high school was always stressed about like code switching and the art of code switching. So like, when did you learn how to code switch? And like when? Yeah.
Great question. Damn. So real rap, fam, you taught me that. Like we had a school of business where this dean, our dean, she passed away, rest her soul, but Dean Sybil Mobley she was a genius, man, like a goddamn genius. She had it so like we would have every week, literally every week, we had someone come into our school from a Fortune 100 company to present to the entire student body of the School of Business. And it was a CEO, wasn't no VP, no director. You had to be in the C-suite to come and present at our school to the entire student body. And we did that gathering of the student body with the CEO was called a forum. And what most companies didn't know was when it came down to present to us, that forum was a class that we would get graded on. And you would get graded on the quality of your question. You would get graded on the kind of research that you would do on behalf of that company. And so it was like this whole thing, this system that was in place. She called it, she had a class that every student had to take in the School of Business. It was called Social Labs. And in Social Labs, she taught you how to interact in a forum. She taught you how to interact in receptions. And so a reception would be a smaller gathering when a company would come down and want to meet with like 12 to 24 students at a time, and they would provide drinks and food, and they would grade you on how you showed up to the reception in terms of your attire. You would get graded on the kind of questions you would ask at the reception, and you would get graded on if you wowed out and tried to eat all the food or do all the drinking at the reception. Like, so she tried to teach you manners and behaviors of how you operate when dealing with a lot of these corporate institutions, because a lot of us coming from where we came from, we didn't have parents that were working in those kinds of environments and in those settings. So we weren't really taught that, right? So FAMU did a great job of teaching me that stuff, right? I think you guys live in that day and age now where, like, for me, when I was dealing with AI working at Reebok, like, we were rebels, and I was definitely a rebel corporately. Like, I don't know if you can see that picture over my shoulder, but like, that was a picture of me back at Reebok with cornrows and looking like a baby AI's twin almost. But it was like, I took a lot of slack being a corporate, because I was like a global VP. So I'm in these corporate boardrooms, iced out with cornrows, doing all this shit, do-rags and shit. But I took a lot of slack for that from some people. But the reason why I did it, because I knew the quality of my contribution. Like, I knew I was certified in terms of being smart, having gone to Kellogg. And I was doing it because a lot of white people at that time, when they saw people that looked like that, they thought they were all thugs. Like, they thought, and for us coming from where we came from, like, AI didn't, like, he wasn't the first person in his family to look like that. He had young nieces and nephews and cousins that were wearing cornrow. Like, it was just what we did. It was a hairstyle. And so it wasn't like this big thing where we were trying to make a political statement. We were just trying to be comfortable and represent our people in terms of where we came from. And, you know, white culture interpreted it differently. But the thing that made me survive through all of that was the fact that I had such a pedigree of experience and accomplishments to back it up. The fact that I was valedictorian, the fact that I had a Kellogg MBA, the fact that I was running a $600 million business and all that stuff, like, nobody could tell me nothing, right? Like, and you know, I was a proud family man, and you know, and so I had my shit together basically. And so if you were just judging me based on how I look, you were missing the point, right? And so the point I was trying to make was that, you know, this look is just a look, and this look can be associated with success. It doesn't have to just be associated with negativity. So there is a onus on some of us that once we do make it, like, how do we make it, and how do we continue to show young people like yourselves that you can make it and still be yourselves? Because that's why I think a lot of people have a hesitation into wanting to do certain things or go into certain fields, because you feel like you got to lose a little bit of yourself, or you got to sell your soul in order to do it. And what I was trying to show is that you didn't have to do that. I was trying to show that there's many images of success. Like, mine isn't the only image, but neither is the image of the dude in the three-piece suit in the briefcase. Like, we can have more than one image of success, right? And so that really became, like, I guess in some ways, a political statement or cultural statement that I was trying to make, that you could have multiple images of success. And the beauty for me, the thing that has helped me to connect with young people, especially back then when I was living that and going through that, was that it taught them that you also didn't have to be an athlete or an entertainer to have this lifestyle. Like, you could still be smart, you could still be seen as cool, you could still be seen as relevant without ever having to dribble a ball or jump on a microphone or sell dope, in terms of, you know, some of the environments where we come from, and they tell you that's the only way you can really make it. I was trying to be like, no, you can still do-rag, white tee, iced out, whatever. If you smart and you do your work and you're capable, you can still make it. Now we live in a day and age where, again, back when I was doing it, there were no tech startups, there was no Facebook, there was no Instagram, there was none of these young, smart, nerdy white boys who were now waking up wearing hoodies and just throwing on whatever and making these billion-dollar companies, because they weren't wearing suits either, but they were never labeled as thugs. They were never labeled as lazy. They were never labeled as anything really derogatory. They were just allowed to be and exist. And, you know, for many years when Mark Zuckerberg was launching Facebook, he wore the same hoodie, flip-flops, and some jeans every day. And nobody ever blinked twice about it, right? So it's like, it's just always funny how when it's on us, it's always analyzed and judged and looked at differently. But I tell young people, like, you know, you can get, if you got your shit together, you can get away with it. The reason why the Sixers tolerated AI and some of the nonsense that he was bringing for so many years was because of how good he was. If he wasn't that good, they wouldn't have tolerated that shit. They just wouldn't. But because of how good he was and because of what he meant to the franchise and what he meant to the city, they had to. And the same thing with Reebok. Like, because of how good I was and because of the contribution I was making and how great things were going, they had to tolerate it. So you can have the life you want. It's just you gotta make sure your shit is the best. Like, you gotta make sure you are qualified. You gotta make sure that you are certified. You gotta make sure that you are doing what you're supposed to do in the core element of what you're like. I knew I was an amazing marketer, like, and brand builder. Like, so I was amazing at that. And so being qualified and certified in that, it allows me the flexibility to do, you know, to have some other things that I could, you know, not have to have a standard, you know. But
I respect that for real though, especially like you being to run, you know, a multi-million-dollar company, but you can still be within your own culture and still, and you know, because you know how
it was hard. I got beat up for it. It was hard, but it was one of those things where it was like, you know, I was willing to do it because I knew how important it was of an image that I was creating for my people. I swear to God, I have so many young people that I've mentored, and that was the one thing, that was one of the things that made me so relatable, was that they saw that I was always who I was, right? And so the code switching that I had to do was, I had to make sure my vocabulary was on point, right? So there are times when you might I might get teased for code switching because I may not curse in certain meetings, but if one of my people, you might hear me talk a little differently, or you might hear my DC twang come out a lot more. Like, you'll hear that little DC slur or whatever come out of me a lot more. But beyond that, like, I don't wear suits. I'm not, like, everybody know I'm not wearing, and it's because I want to be comfortable. It ain't that I got anything to do. I've been doing this now for so long. It's like, I'm not wearing a suit to impress you, and it's certainly not making me feel better. So, like, let me just be me, and you gonna get the best. And so I've been fortunate enough, because of my success, to be able to live and walk in that way. Hello.
you back now.
Oh, okay. Damn, my bad.
Now you right about Zuckerberg though. He got about like 25 of them same white T-shirts, and don't nobody say nothing about it.
Don't say nothing about it. Say nothing about it.
Especially in the era where you see kids, adults getting fired from jobs, or kids getting suspended or can't graduate because they got dreads or something within our natural, our culture and stuff like that. So, it's a barrier, but one that shouldn't be there. So, I respect that you could, take the heat and just go ahead and be you throughout, whichever setting or circumstance.